The issue begins with Peter eating Chinese takeout under his web umbrella in the freezing cold and heavy rain. He smirks at the fortune slip he got in his food, which reads that today will be his lucky day. Thinking to himself, he scoffs at the idea, looking down at his soaked shoes and remarking that he just spent his last dime on a hot meal, only for the sky to open up and drench everything, including his lunch. He notes that Aunt May is expecting her favorite nephew at feast in half an hour, and at this rate, by the time he swings there in this weather, he'd practically qualify as an honorary Atlantean. Just as he's lamenting his situation, a Metro card drops onto his web umbrella. Staring at his fortune slip again, he wonders if today might actually be his lucky day. Checking the card, he finds it has $2 remaining, just enough for one final ride. Peter's mood shifts completely, his excitement lighting up his face. Even the people around him notice, with one man commenting on how happy he looks. Peter grins and replies that the guy would be shocked to know how little it takes to make someone like him happy. Bounding down the subway stairs, dodging commuters with ease, Peter smiles to himself, convinced that it really is his lucky day. Peter rushes down the subway stairs and asks an officer to hold the door so he can hop in. The officer obliges, but sternly tells Peter to wait for the next train. Peter tries to reason with him, but the officer cuts him off angrily, insisting he wait. Just then, a woman opens the door of the car behind and motions for Peter to hop in. Wasting no time, Peter dashes over and slips inside. When she asks how he managed to jump in before the train pulled away, he grins and says it's his lucky day. But his grin quickly fades as his spider sense flares up, warning him of danger. Peter pushes through the crowded car, urgently trying to reach the door while clutching his mask, preparing to suit up. When he finally gets there, he realizes he's too late. The train violently lurches off its tracks, crashing into the tunnel walls. The lights go out, plunging everything into chaos. In the dim glow of someone's flashlight, the passengers see Peter, his civilian clothes torn, straining under the massive wreckage. He's holding up a collapsing section of the tunnel beneath the East River, asking for a little help. One man, panicked, accuses Spider-Man of trying to tear down the tunnel and kill them all. Peter mutters to himself, "No good deed. That's the story of my life." Shouting over the chaos, Peter explains he's holding back the river and urges the passengers to rescue the people trapped beneath the wreckage. Another man steps up, yelling at the others to focus. Spider-Man is keeping the roof from caving in. The crowd finally springs into action, freeing the trapped passengers. Peter quips to the helpful man that he's promoted to his new press agent. Once everyone is clear, Peter counts to 3 and leaps free, allowing the huge wreckage to crash down behind him. An officer orders Peter to freeze and stay where he is, then calls for his partner to come and cover Peter. When the flashlight is aimed at his partner, it reveals he's been crushed under the wreckage. Peter apologizes, explaining that he can't be at both ends at once to hold it up. As the officer notices Peter reloading his web shooters, fear takes over, and he points his gun at Peter, commanding him to freeze again. Peter quickly webs the gun, assuring the officer that he understands his frustration, but urges him not to take it out on him. Peter then calms everyone down, discussing the situation and asking if anyone saw what happened, noting that random earthquakes don't occur in New York. A man steps forward, explaining that he and his friend might have been targeted. They're jurors in a case against the criminal Carnelli. Peter speculates that Carnelli might have ordered a hit on the entire jury. Everyone gets off the train, and Peter warns them that his spider sense is still going off, meaning anything could happen at any moment, so they need to stay alert. He tells the man that causing a scene like this, sabotaging the jury, and making it all look like an accident just to derail a trial seems like overkill. There are far easier ways to achieve the same result. The man responds, suggesting that maybe the culprit wants to send a message to the entire court system not to cross him. Peter acknowledges the insight, noting it's a good point, then asks the man if he knows him from somewhere. The man replies no, but Peter remarks that he sounds like someone familiar and asks for his name. The man hesitates and says he'd rather not share it. Suddenly, the ceiling begins to crack, and large chunks start collapsing as water from the river above gushes into the tunnel. Chaos erupts as people scream and run, pleading with Peter to do something. Peter immediately begins webbing up the breaches, reassuring everyone that he's doing his best to stop the flood. As he works, he mutters to himself that this is unlikely to be an accident. Amid the panic, someone drops the flashlight, and it shatters, plunging the area into near darkness. In the darkness, amid the chaos of panicked shouting, a man calls out that he's found a ladder. Peter's spidey sense flares, and he quickly activates the spidey light on his belt. Jumping in front of the man, Peter warns that something's wrong with the ladder. Suddenly, a hand shoots out from it, grabbing Peter, and the Shocker yanks him up, shocking him with his gauntlets. Shocker sneers, telling Peter that he works for Carnelli and that the jurors aren't getting out alive. Peter retaliates, kicking Shocker in the face. When Shocker tries to climb away, Peter grabs him and pulls him back down, igniting a fierce battle. Each blow between the two further damages the already fragile tunnel. The fight escalates until Peter slams Shocker into a wall and attempts to crush his gauntlets. However, the immense feedback from the gauntlets causes the entire tunnel to collapse, burying both of them in the wreckage. Emerging from the rubble, Peter mutters about the stupid cookie and the stupid lucky day he's having. The man from earlier approaches him, voicing doubts about their chances of survival. Peter, coughing, acknowledges the grim situation. The roof is unstable, the access shaft is blocked, and rising water leaves little hope. The man hesitates before expressing a need to apologize, revealing it is for something involving his son. He then introduces himself as J. Jonah Jameson Sr., leaving Peter speechless and stunned. At feast, Aunt May glances at her watch and tells some of the workers that her nephew Peter promised he'd be here before noon, and now he's late. A cleaner nearby asks if he's coming from Brooklyn. If so, it's not his fault. Their attention shifts to the TV, where a news reporter is covering the developing story. The reporter explains the situation, stating that workers are doing their best to reach the last car lost in the tunnel. Aunt May's worry deepens, but then the reporter shares an update. The car stuck in the tunnel is a private vehicle carrying jurors. Aunt May sighs, saying that she shouldn't feel relieved knowing how terrible this is for those poor people, but she's glad to hear that of all places, Peter isn't there. Peter frantically webs the ceiling trying to stabilize it, but Jonah's father points out that the webbing isn't holding. Peter mutters that in about 20 minutes the webbing will dissolve, leaving them all submerged in the river. Shifting focus, he presses Jonah's father on his earlier comment about being Jonah's father. Jonah's father admits he's sorry they had to meet under such circumstances and apologizes for his son. Peter dismisses the apology, suggesting it should go to the entire human race instead. As Peter searches for an exit, a frustrated woman snaps at him, accusing him of giving them false hope about surviving. Ignoring her, Peter draws the group's attention to the real problem, the Shocker. He explains that Shocker is the one responsible for their dire situation. A furious police officer, still grieving his partner's death, tries to attack Shocker, but Peter intervenes. He argues that while Shocker is a despicable criminal, he's not foolish enough to trap himself without a way out. When Shocker hesitates, Peter grabs him, slamming him against a wall and cracking it. With a sharp demand for answers, his anger boils over. The group watches in stunned silence, unnerved by Peter's sudden intensity. Shocker, barely able to speak after what Peter did to him, weakly explains there's a secret, unused maintenance tunnel they can use to escape. When Peter demands to know its location, Shocker points out that it's further up the tunnel where they had been fighting. Peter grabs one of Shocker's gauntlets, intending to use it to break through the sealed passage, and instructs Jameson to shine the flashlight on him. Peter warns everyone to stand back and tells them to ignore his girlish screams because it's going to hurt. Bracing himself, he activates the gauntlet and punches through the sealed tunnel, crying out in pain as the vibrations tear through him. The barrier collapses, but the debris falls on Peter, knocking him unconscious. The scene shifts to Jonah Jameson, who is sitting with his wife Marla and a lawyer to start their divorce proceedings. As the lawyer recounts Jonah's frustrations about Marla selling the Daily Bugle without his approval, Jonah notices a photograph of his father with the jury members trapped in the train tunnels below. Realizing his father is in danger, Jonah abruptly grabs his coat and storms out to help. Back at the tunnel, Peter begins to regain consciousness as people clear the debris off him. A doctor kneels beside him, asking if he can move or if anything is broken. Peter groans but jokes about whether he will still be able to play the violin. Recovering quickly, Peter pulls Jameson aside, handing him the flashlight and signaling for him to follow. Together, they climb up the tunnel. Once at the top, Peter webs together broken pipes, creating a makeshift lift for the people below, and spins a webbing rope to lower down. With water rising rapidly and nearing chest level, the trapped people begin scrambling into the lift, arguing about its safety. Peter has no time to reassure them as they climb aboard. He starts hauling the lift up, straining under the weight. Jameson, shining the flashlight toward him, asks what he can do. Peter, focusing all his strength on pulling the lift, tells him to keep the light steady and not to worry about him. While pulling the group up, Peter glances at Jameson and asks what he did to Jonah, joking if he raised him in a box full of onions and cigars. Jameson explains that the cigar smoker was Jonah's stepfather, not him. He adds that he wasn't around to raise Jonah because he had to leave. Jameson trails off, then mutters for Peter to forget what he said, but after a pause, Peter asks if Jonah was old enough to remember him when he left. Before Jameson can answer, Peter screams in pain, his hands shaking under the strain. Jameson asks if Peter is okay or needs the light, but Peter grits his teeth and insists he's fine, urging Jameson to keep the light on the others so they don't panic in the dark. Jameson, after a moment of silence, continues, saying Jonah was definitely old enough to recognize him. He explains that since then, he's been living out in the country. Peter asks if Jonah knows he's back, but before Jameson can respond, Peter screams again as the strain worsens. When they finally get everyone up, Shocker stumbles to a toolbox, retrieves a flashlight, and switches it on. The beam reveals Peter holding the webbing, his body racked with pain as he urges everyone to hurry. A dozen rats cling to him, biting into his arms and legs. Despite his agony, Peter doesn't let go until everyone is safely off the lift. Once the last person is clear, Peter releases the webbing and uses Shocker's gauntlet to send a powerful shockwave, scattering the rats. Seeing that the water is rising dangerously high, the group quickly sets out, hurrying through the tunnel to reach the exit before it floods completely. After walking for some time through the flooded water, Peter jokes to Shocker that they should be in Connecticut by now. Shocker spots the lights of the approaching rescue team and tells Peter that salvation is just ahead. Then he turns to Peter, smirking, and says he was so close. Peter's spider sense suddenly flares as he notices something about Shocker's gauntlet. Realizing the danger, Peter acts quickly and throws the gauntlet just as Shocker presses a button on his belt. The gauntlet explodes against the tunnel wall, creating another collapse. Shocker uses the chaos to slip away while the group is once again sealed off, and the water starts rising rapidly. Looking up, Peter spots natural light streaming through a sewer grate leading to the street above. Wasting no time, he starts carrying people on his back, one by one, crawling up to the sewer grate to get them out safely before returning for the next person. Once the last person is out, Jameson tells Peter that everyone has been rescued. Peter gets surprised by Jameson's selflessness, but when Jameson suddenly stops responding, Peter looks down and realizes he has slipped underwater, unconscious from drowning. Without hesitation, Peter dives into the flooded water and pulls Jameson out, saving him from drowning just in time. As reporters spot Spider-Man, they begin speculating that he might be involved in the catastrophe. One reporter approaches Peter, trying to ask him questions, but Peter quickly dismisses them, saying he's not the story here. Noticing Jonah looking for his father, Peter tells Jameson to stay put and not move. Peter approaches Jonah, mocking him, calling him Junior a dozen times. Then he tells Jonah that now he owes him one. Jonah, confused, asks what he's talking about. Peter grins and tells him to get ready to meet the one and only. But before he can finish, Jonah's father suddenly disappears into the crowd. The police arrive and demand that Spider-Man freeze. Realizing the situation is about to escalate, Peter quips to himself that it's time to disappear, unless he wants to end up in an orange jumpsuit. He leaps onto a nearby ambulance and escapes. On the way home, Peter reflects on the day. At least Jameson is still alive, and while Shocker managed to escape, Peter still saved a dozen other people by being in the right place at the right time. All things considered, he decides he can chalk this up as a lucky day.